Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth and final installment of Cocktails and Conversations with the Dean, a CVPA alumni feature. Here's my cocktail for the day, a fine glass of Brita filtered water. Welcome to everybody watching at home or wherever you are. My name is Rick Davis, and I do have the pleasure of being the Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts. And this is also our last day of the spring season of the first season of Mason Arts at Home, which is a web collection of content, some of it live like today, some of it streamed from performances, all of it interesting. And we have been so profoundly grateful to be able to bring such diverse and interesting content to you since late March, when we all closed our theaters and our exhibition halls and moved all of our classes online and shut down the venues. We've been coming to you several times a week in this format, and we're just grateful for your attention. I'm grateful because the Alumni Cocktails and Conversations programs, this is number 4, have been a fantastic chance for alumni to reconnect with each other, for me to meet some alums that I didn't have the pleasure of working with, and to re-meet many folks from across our disciplines who are doing astonishing things in their careers professionally out in what is incorrectly called the real world, because it's all real, but in that other world beyond the walls of the university. And today's program is no exception, and in fact is a fitting culmination of this series. Before I introduce our panelists today, I just want to thank Ryan Brayton from our development office in CVPA for his amazing work at assembling this particular aspect of Mason Arts at Home, and Adrian Godwin and Haley Smizer, in addition to the Center for the Arts staff who are behind the scenes helping all of the Mason Arts at Home programs achieve getting on air in the first place and running smoothly, if they do. And we'll find out in a minute whether this one does. So I'm going to introduce the 3 members of the alumni panel, all sort of in series, and we're going to meet them all quickly. And then we're going to spend some time individually with each of them, and then we'll bring them all back for a kind of panel discussion. The theme of today's program is essentially coping with the current crisis, in so many words, promoting and sharing your art during social distancing, to actually pay attention to my lower third here. And this is a group of theater artists, 2 performers, and 1 artistic director who have each established themselves as very, very well-regarded professionals and who are all dealing with this situation in different ways. So it'll be my pleasure. Let me start by bringing on the screen. We're going to kind of go in chronological order of graduation. Scott Rinker from the class of 1994. Hi, Scott.
Hi, how are you?
He's an actor based in Los Angeles. And our next guest will be Cristina Alicea from the class of 2001. Cristina is an artistic director at Vermont Stage and has established a fine career as a director prior to her institutional opportunity. And Mildred, or Millie as we know her, Langford, from the class of 2002, who is an actor also based in Los Angeles but has extensive performance credits in Chicago as well, and has recently branched out into both writing and producing. So this is our panel. It's just so great to see all of you. We spent many, many hours in a variety of strange and not very clean rooms at George Mason when you were in school, and I'm so proud of everything that you've done. So I'm going to kick out Cristina and Millie now, and we're going to see you soon, though, and we're going to spend some time with Scott. First, Scott, hello again. And hello. I know that you have relevant family members probably watching or lurking in the back of the house, but Allen Rinker is your spouse and also a George Mason Theater alum.
Yes, 95 as a matter of fact.
95. So hi, Kat. I hope you're watching. Or maybe you're next door. Anyway, Scott, tell us, take about 5 minutes if you would, and tell us sort of the very quick story of your artistic work.
Wow. Okay. I will do that. You're blocking my light, sweetie.
Oh. Not the first time you've said that, I'm sure.
No, not the first time I've said that. Hopefully much more pleasant than I just did. I feel like right now I feel nervous as a freshman auditioning for his very first play at the school. So I graduated in 94 from Mason. And I feel like I was there kind of at the beginning. I arrived in 89, which was just shortly before Rick arrived. And I think the ball really got rolling at the school. So I kind of felt like I was in at the ground floor with
Yeah,
much
absolutely.
of this. Theater of the First Amendment was something new and exciting, and which is unfortunately now no longer with us, but at the time gave me a great opportunity to sort of experience working with professional actors on stage while still being a student. I think I did 2 shows there as a student, Cellophane Xerox, which you directed, Rick, about the Kent State incident, and then Spiel of 36, which was about the 1936 Olympics. And then you hired me for my very first professional show immediately after to do The Living, which was another phenomenal thing. Never so many quick changes in my entire life.
And a play about a plague with social distancing as its governing principle.
It all comes full circle. Yep. So crazily enough, I just hope I don't ever have to crawl under a length of stage like that again to make an entrance. So after graduation, let's start with, I met my wife in college, as Rick mentioned, Kat Kalin, who was originally at the time Kathleen Chang. But we met in college. We've been together for now 20, almost 28 years, which I highly recommend. If you can meet your spouse early, do it. It makes everything else that comes after this so much easier and better. Trust me.
I concur.
To have that partner, to have that rock, someone that you can lean on when times are down, which is always going to come. It's just the nature of the beast of what we do. So we spent about 3 years working in DC, everywhere from Everyman Theater. I did Buried Child there, and The Foreigner, to Signature Theater, TFA, of course. And then we moved to Los Angeles, where I have been blessed and lucky enough to call myself a working actor for like the last 22 years. So I could give you a quick recap of all the shows, but that's what IMDb is for. I've popped on a few shows here and there. In fact, Beth, if you want to throw the first slide up, that'd be cool. So this I threw together. The one in the upper corner is the last show I did at Mason, Two Gentlemen of Verona. That is my lovely bride right there. She wasn't then, but she soon became.
And that was directed by Ed Jarrow.
It was indeed.
Who's still on our faculty and a wonderful actor in the world.
And a dear friend as well, thankfully. In fact, all of the faculty I count as friends at this point, which I don't know many people could say that. So I'm lucky and been really fortunate. While in DC, I booked I got my SAG card doing industrials. And then I booked a little telefilm called The Day Lincoln Was Shot, which I filmed in Richmond. And that's the one there on the right-hand side where I played Lincoln's secretary, John Nicolay, with a terrible goatee, if I remember correctly. It's a horrid thing, but it's made for television. What are you going to do? But Lance Henriksen played Lincoln.
That's great.
And then a couple other little high points from the thing. I get to be the very first of this alien species on Star Trek, on the lower left there, which was a geek out moment for me as a huge sci-fi and Star Trek fan. And then on the right, that's Ron Perlman as Hellboy. I got to fly to Budapest to shoot a commercial with him because he was there filming a movie. So why not take the cast and everyone else to meet him? And you, Beth, you can get rid of that now. Thank you. So that's just sort of a quick little intro. In LA, like I said, I've been blessed working in television and film. Everything from shows like CSI Miami or Castle, Bones, Ghost Whisperer, to comedies way back in when, like The Drew Carey Show, things like that. I've worked with some amazing people who the director of, as it turns out, the director of The Day Lincoln Was Shot, John Gray, I became close with, and a few years later, he created a show called The Ghost Whisperer. I reconnected with him on set and ended up doing 4 episodes of the show. It seems to be a recurring theme throughout my time, which is relationships that start as something casual lead to other things. And it's not about pushing people for jobs. That's not what they're there for. They're just people, relationships that you've built and developed over time, sort of one person helping another along, so to speak. A guy who had a young writer at the time, had an office next to my wife and I where we were working in Studio City out here when we first arrived in LA. Eventually went on to be the co-executive producer of a show called CSI New York. Trey Calloway is his name. And I did several shows for him, Rush Hour. I just did the spinoff to Grey's Anatomy last season called Station 19. There was a point to all of this, which was that relationships and partnerships are integral, I think, to the journey. And it's important to not be so focused on the day-to-day grind of getting the next gig, getting the next audition, getting to the next plot, that you forget that you're crafting not just a career, you're crafting a life. Okay. And that's something to always bear in mind. The more rounded you are in your interests outside of acting and outside of theater and outside of all of this stuff, the more rounded you are as a person, the more you bring right back into your craft. And that hit me full circle when I became a parent 9 years ago. Everybody talks about it, but it's true that something changed inside, and especially when it became no longer about me. So the world changed and my focus changed, and I no longer went into a room so desperate for a job because there were other things I had to think of outside of that. Let's see, let's pull up the next slide if we could. Commercials were a huge part of it. This is the campaign that changed my life.
Yeah.
For Snapple, I did 4 spots for them. The first one there went to Thailand, then China, South Africa, and you can pull that away now. Thank you. But that afforded us the ability to. I went from working in construction one day to having a call back to a week later being in Thailand, to a year after that. Having enough money in the bank for Kat and I to start thinking about fertility treatments so that we could actually have my daughter Beckett, who at one point was going to be nicknamed Snapple.
You made a strong choice of the name. I like the name.
Oh, Beckett. Well, that was also an ode to waiting for Godot, because there was a long period of waiting for her to arrive. Unlike Godot, she actually showed up, thankfully.
Beautiful.
And then I had a great moment, just really quickly, because I know we're running out of time. So I had a great moment. The third slide, if you could. I did a show at the bottom there called Lucifer a couple of years ago, where I'm playing an actor who the lead character thinks is a murderer because he's confusing him with a murderer he saw on an episode of Bones. As it turns out, I played a murderer on Bones about 6 years prior to that. So they wrote that into the show. And it became this meta moment where the character I'm playing was actually me playing another character played by me at another time. And the internet kind of went nuts. At least the Lucifer and Bones fanatics did. You can get rid of that one now. And the last shot here, if we could, is that's me and my daughter when she was 15 months doing a Wells Fargo commercial. The last time she appeared on film until this shot here on the right, which is, I'll come back to in a second. And then down at the bottom there, that's my wife and I, Kathleen, in another spot that we got cast in and filmed, ironically enough, on our anniversary, which was a lovely moment. On the right is a project that we just finished right before the world shut down called Ellie Turning 8. It's a film that my wife, Kathleen, wrote and directed and produced and gripped, and every other job that could possibly be done, she was responsible for. All I had to do was show up and act, and I didn't even do that very well. But I can't. Well, I recommend you bring her on next season, Rick, and then she can talk, and we can talk about where the film is in post at that point.
Absolutely.
So that sort of brings me full circle, I think.
Well, that's a great story, Scott. And some of it I knew, some of it I didn't really know, and many of those pictures I had not seen. So that's really wonderful to share with all of us. And we will come back to the question of relationships and the question of being an artist over the long term, because I think that's something that all of our panelists will be interested in talking about. So thank you so much. You may now go back to the green room and finish that beverage. And I will bring in Cristina. and we will talk a little bit about life as a director and as an artistic director, which is,
Hi.
yes, great to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah.
So how did you, first of all, sort of finish up at Mason and start establishing yourself in the profession as a director?
Gosh, well, I graduated from Mason in 2001, June 2001, and a couple of friends and I decided in December, right before that we were all going to just move to New York and make a go of it. And so I graduated like, I don't know, May, and literally 2 weeks later, I was in an apartment in New York and moved there. Didn't really know anybody, had one or two friends. And so it was June-ish. I got a job waiting tables, June 2001. And then guess what happened in September of 2001?
Wow.
So my timing was impeccable.
Yeah.
So, and actually I was waiting tables at a restaurant called Sardi's in Times Square. And I remember,
just that one.
Yeah. Just a little place called Sardi's. And I remember the day after 9/11, sort of they said you had to come in for your shift, which was totally crazy. And I went there, and I'll never forget. It was like a scene out of that movie Vanilla Sky, where it's just like everything's empty. I got out of Times Square station, and it was like tumbleweeds rolling down the street. Nobody was there, and stood there for this lunch shift. And of course, nobody walked in the door. And then I quit my job. and I sort of like ran to upstate New York and kind of was like, what am I doing here? What am I doing with my life? And then like 1 or 2 months later, I went back to New York, and I was like, okay, well, I can't really avoid, what's happening. And I just kind of spent the next year just regrouping after that. And most things weren't really happening anyway in New York for so long after 9/11. And then about a year after I'd been living in New York, I decided to finally go, okay, well, I moved here for a reason, so I might as well make some attempt to do something. And so I ended up joining like a little sort of off, like improv company. And then through that, I joined a little theater company. Nothing, just, and I would get together with a bunch of like actor friends and just kind of like do scene work. And it was sort of just something that we did to pass the time, to continue working on our craft without having to pay money for classes or anything like that. So I started doing that at this theater company. And little by little, I sort of found myself stepping away from acting and wanting to take on little directing projects. And that's kind of what I did. I just started like directing little scenes, grabbing actor friends that I loved and was like, hey, let's do this little scene from this, 10-minute play. And we would, and I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. And then I do another thing. And then all of a sudden, kind of just naturally over time, I found myself not acting anymore, and I was directing. And I remember there was one point where I ended up directing this short play, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was now. But I do remember the feeling that I had when I had friends and family and other, strangers come and see this thing, and they were laughing and laughing. And I sat there and I looked at the audience, and I thought to myself, I'm a director. And that was kind of it for me. It was like a light bulb, and I just was like, ding. And I kind of didn't really look back after that moment for acting, maybe now I'm sort of like, what would have happened? But I really, like, at that moment, I was so sure, oh, this is my path. And so I stopped auditioning, and I just, I didn't end up in grad school because I didn't have the money, nor did I even really have an interest in like the formal, like, academia in terms of going to grad school specifically for directing. So I just kind of continued doing what I was doing, which is just getting more actor friends that I really liked together and putting on more things. And then, and then I sort of found my people in New York, my actor friends who I loved their work. playwright friends, and we ended up starting a theater company and did that for about 4 or 5 years, just producing our own work in New York, and as lots of people do, off theater productions. And during that time, that's when I was teaching myself how to produce. How do you raise money? How do you put together a show? And of course I was directing more. And then I blinked and 9 years had gone by in New York, and I did lots of little freelance projects along the way. And then I sort of stepped back for a moment because I made a little promise to myself when I moved to New York. I was like, okay, I'm going to give this till I'm 30. And if I'm not making at least half my income doing theater or something theater related, then I'm going to reassess. And I'm glad that I sort of set that little goalpost for myself, because then when 29 hit, I was like, I'm still waiting tables and I'm still doing this then. What is going on here? And so that's when I kind of was like, okay, I need to reassess. And I did. I started doing some thinking about New York. And that's when I decided to leave. And I moved back to the DC area, and I ended up assisting the managing director at Woolly Mammoth in DC, Jeff, and at the time, and Jeff Herman. And it was like a life-changing experience. I had an amazing time. I learned so much about theater management, and also it affirmed so many things I had already taught myself too, which was really great. And then I was there about 6 months, and I had like a 6-month review with Jeff, and he was like, what do you want to do? Like, obviously this is not the final stop. Like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I kind of want to do what you and Howard are doing. I want to do, I think I want to run a theater. And he was like, so just go do that. And I was like, I don't know. How do you just go do that? And he was like, well, just start applying for jobs, see what comes, and don't be worried about where it is. Just go wherever will have you. And then, you'll be on that path. And so he sort of sent me out of his office to look for jobs. And I went back to my desk, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. And I started, I put together a resume and all this stuff and started interviewing for jobs. And literally 3 months later, I got the job as artistic director of Vermont Stage.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Look at that. And you have a beautiful graphic.
Look at that.
Oh, yes. Fantastic.
And that was in 2001. And I, and I look back and go, okay. 2011.
There we go.
When I got the gig. Yeah. So 10 years later, basically.
Yeah.
And I've been there ever since. So it's been nine years. This fall will be my 10th season. And,
let me just say, that's a pretty long run for an artistic director in the American theater. And so congratulations and keeping the theater alive and growing during that time. You brought us a couple of really nice productions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Feel free. You could just throw them up, whatever. Yeah. And that is The Last Wide Open by a DC playwright named Audrey Cephaly.
Yep. Wonderful writer.
Yes, she is. And you could just show the others. Maria and Rosetta by George Brandt. This is Relativity by Mark St. Germain. And Double Wide by another playwright, Stephen Spotswood.
Yep. That's right.
And just some of the work that I've done. I didn't direct all of those, but some of the pieces that we've done at Vermont Stage over the years, more recently, actually.
Well, we're going to come back to you, Cristina, when we have the panel and talk about how an institutional artist like yourself is dealing with the present moment. But I'm grateful for your sharing your journey that got you to Burlington. And it's, again, a very impressive story. So why don't you go to the green room, and we'll bring in our third guest, Millie Langford, class of 2002. Hello, Millie.
Hi.
And same drill. If you could just give us a brief recap of sort of how you got to where you are, and then all the exciting things that you're currently doing.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I am a graduate of Mason, 2002. Let's see. Shortly after Mason, I went on tour for 5 months with a large children's theater company in Richmond called Theater 4. And so I toured that for about 5 months. We did Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. And I realized that after touring that wasn't really for me. So I came back after that. And then I was in the DC area for probably a few more years. And I did a lot of children's theater there as well, working with Karen Evans with the Young Playwrights Theater. So I did that quite a bit. And then I also worked with Jennifer Nelson at African Continuum, ACCO. And then did some understudying at the Folger. So did that for a few years, and then realized, I think, that I was ready to do some theater where I could be my own age. I loved children's theater, but I think I was ready to play my own age. So so I was talking with a friend, Megan Kelleher, who was also a graduate of George Mason University, and she was in Chicago at the time. And in school, and probably even at the start of high school, I always saw, I think, New York as being the place of where I was going to go afterwards, because, Broadway is always the next step, But we were talking, and she was in Chicago, and she was doing more of the improv scene with Second City. And so we were talking, and I was telling her how, I was kind of looking for a change, looking to want to kind of be somewhere different. And she said, oh, well, you should look at Chicago. And I had never really been to the Midwest, had never even really heard about Chicago, didn't know much about it. So I ordered this book that she told me about called The Bible. And the Bible was anything that you could think of theater-wise about in Chicago, theater companies, where to take classes, headshots, resumes, whatever you needed, it was in this book called The Bible. So I got it, and I started going through it, and I came across Steppenwolf. Had never heard of Steppenwolf. So I went on their website, and I was like, oh, but I recognize some of their ensemble members, from film and, some heavy hitters. And so I was just kind of going through their website, and I saw that they had a school. They had a summer program called the School at Steppenwolf. So I said, that sounds interesting. I'll apply. So I applied, went to New York to audition, and shortly afterwards, got a letter saying that I had gotten in. So that sort of started my journey to Chicago. I went to Chicago for those 11 weeks. I stayed with Megan. I fell in love with the city of Chicago, fell in love with it. It was warm. It was beautiful. I had a great experience with the programs, learned so much, and decided, you know what, I think I'm going to come back to Chicago. I think I'm going to come here. So 2007, I moved to Chicago, and I was there for 9 years and did a ton of theater. And I think it really just taught me about, it just expounded upon the craft of being an actor. And I just learned so much there and loved the city, and became a company member with Timeline Theater. And so it was just a wonderful experience in Chicago, and being there 9 years. And then by the time I got to my 9th year, I said, okay, I've enjoyed my time here. I think, again, I'm ready for another shift. And I think I was like, okay, I think the West Coast is going to be the next step. So I've been here. So 2016, I moved out here to LA because I think I was ready to start putting more of a focus on TV and film. So moved out here, have been here 4 years now. So I've lived on every coast. I've lived the East, the Midwest, and the West. And here has been just another wonderful experience coming here. And I think being here, I started taking classes at a studio called BGB, working with Risa Brahman-Garcia and Steve Braun. And in the studio, they really stress about artists taking power over their careers, over their crafts, and really encourage students to create their own work. And so that's really the next step that I started to take when I got out to LA. And I have a few photos. I forgot about the photos, the earlier photos that from Mason, my earlier productions at Mason.
That's all right.
Yeah. So this is from Much Ado About Nothing. Yes, it was directed by Catherine Widener. This was another wonderful experience. And there's another Taylor Kaufman, who I actually work with out here and in California. We work at the same radio station. So it was awesome to actually reconnect with Taylor when I got out here. Then the next one is, this was a piece that was put together by Jessica, and I think it's called 10 Scenes of Passion. I can't remember the exact name, but this was another awesome experience.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That was sort of put together by students. Jessica directed it, and she put it all together. And so that was great. And then the other one was through Theater of the First Amendment. Yes, myself and Julia and Jessica again. And also forgetting to mention that Theater of the First Amendment was my first time working professionally. I did 2 productions with you guys. And so this was Lady from the Sea. And then the other one that I did was with Mary Hall Surface and David Maddox. We did that adaptation of Pinocchio.
Mississippi Pinocchio.
Mississippi Pinocchio, that's right. And then the other photos, I think one is, this is a piece called Gunshot Medley, Part 1. And this was written by an amazing young playwright out here in LA called Deanna Michelle Daniel. So this was another amazing piece that just was gut-wrenching. And it was, about sort of systemic racism and a lot of that within the African-American community. So this was an amazing show. And then I also did, the next one is from a production of Native Son by Nambi E. Kelly. And this was done at the Kirk Douglas Theater, which is part of Center Theater Group out here in LA. So that was an amazing time as well. And then the other last picture that I have, so in terms of talking about creating your own work, some good friends and I from Chicago who are also now here in LA, and one of them is here on the far right, Tiffany Yvonne Cox in the gray and black. She and I and another good friend of ours, Sean Walton, co-created, co-wrote, and co-executive produced a new series called Commune the series, and you can check it out on on YouTube. And so this was my first time sort of branching out and creating my own work. And so now that's something, and we can take that away. That's it. But so now that's something that I'm really into right now is producing, which I'm doing right now, and writing, and really starting to create my own content and put it out there. And so that's been really liberating, I think, and it's really forced me to sort of tap into other areas of my artistry that I don't think I really thought that I could do. Because in Chicago, I really just focused on acting. And I was like, that's what I do. I'm just an actor. I can't write. I can't do this, because it all seems so daunting, because I felt like it wasn't something I studied or went to school for besides acting. And so, but as storytellers, it's really just telling a story. And as an actor, that's what you do all the time. So it's really just doing that and then adding, just putting it to paper. And
wow, another fantastic story, and what a treat to see some of those pictures. So Millie, thank you for that. I'm going to bring the whole panel back in, and I'd like to address the viewing audience and say to you that if you have any questions or comments for these fine artists, I will be seeing them in the chat over here, and I will be happy to take ones that are appropriate. I mean, I'll be happy to take questions and pass them along. Couple things emerged here as you all talked about your life stories, and I want to tie a couple of them together. I want to drill down a little bit on a theme that Cristina actually introduced and Millie took a little bit farther, and that is this idea of creating your own work, just finding a group of artists and basically, if for whatever reason, self-producing or self-actualizing in a field that might not be the one that you intended to set up. And I just thought it was striking that you both talked about that. And I'm going to start with Cristina to elaborate a little bit on that, how that energy of self-production, how much of that is still sort of with you as you now are at the helm of an actual on the ground institution that you're responsible for a staff and a season, and it's a different energy, but you're still self-producing in a way.
I feel like I'm still self-producing because it is what I'm doing. I'm it's under a specific brand, under a specific mission, Vermont Stage, but I'm still very much at the helm of producing, sometimes directing and raising money for, and supporting the mission of this organization through the work on our stage. So yeah, it does still sometimes feel like it's self-produced. Yeah, it's still a part of what I do. And I still use the things that I learned on the fly when I was 25, every day.
Yeah, oh, that's great to hear. And Billy, and then Scott, I want to come to you as well, because that strikes me that the last picture that you showed us is a way of sort of engaging in that too in the film genre. So,
Right.
Millie, anything to add to that in terms of how that has affected your self-conception as an artist, maybe, or?
No, I think, and even in this time, I think it even, there's even more of an energy to want to do it, because now everyone is at home in one place and they can, more eyes can be on it. But I think it sort of opens you up now to doing even more stuff. And I think it creates more opportunities for you to produce your own stuff. And like I said, it's just been a liberating factor, because I think at some point, as an artist, I think you feel like you sometimes get to this benchmark and you're like, okay, well, I'm here, but I feel like there are other things that I can be doing. So how can I access those things? And sometimes it comes down to you creating your own stuff, because it's either you're not getting the kind of work that you want to be able to sink your teeth into, or you don't feel like you're getting those opportunities. So you said, okay, well, how do I rectify this issue? And that's doing it yourself. And it's just been amazing. And then, so it just sort of gets this ball rolling. You're like, oh, okay, I did that. Well, I think I can do something else. And then it just, it just keeps going. You're like, oh, I have all of these ideas and all of these stories. And now I know that I don't have to have had a degree in screenwriting. I can just go write something and put it up, film it on your, on your iPhone. They're movies filmed on iPhones.
Absolutely. Scott, what do you think about all that?
Well, I totally agree. And I feel like sort of weird that we came into LA with, I think, much of that same passion, I think, to create our own content. Unfortunately, when we hit originally, this was in 98, 99, the practicality of shooting your own stuff just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And Kevin Smith had done Clerks, but he still had to beg, borrow, and steal to get the stock footage, or the end cuts of rolls to be able to shoot that thing. And we tried to get stuff going, and it just didn't happen. With the digital revolution of the last 10, 12 years, it's a whole new world. And then from a purely practical standpoint, financially, and I don't mean to put that out there as the reason why we do this, but there is an element of that. The way the industry has changed dramatically, that to see a longevity financially as an actor in the film and television world, ownership of your own material is really the way to have that done. Residuals have decreased and decreased and decreased. And, with the spreading out of the insane number of platforms on which content is being done, the financial ramifications of that as an actor, especially a middle-class working actor, you get squeezed down more and more, marginalized more and more. But if you can create, as Millie and you guys are doing, if you can create and own your own stuff, it's a whole new ballgame. And the ability to get that stuff seen is now better and greater than ever.
That's great. Hey, we have a very insightful question from the ether, and I'm going to read it verbatim, and I'm not going to call on anybody. Just just whoever wants to have at it. How do you envision theater artists continuing their growth beyond one's experience in higher education to keep growing as artists and deepening your practice as artists?
Do it.
Yeah.
It's weird. I'm sorry, I don't mean to, but it's true. Just do it. Do it. As we've all talked about, as Cristina was talking about, like when her time in New York, get friends together, produce stuff, work on stuff. If a friend has a project, say, hey, would you mind doing it? Say yes. Say yes to everything. Say yes to everything.
It reiterate, find your people. Like
find
your tribe, because there's people that you really resonate with as artists and folks that you don't, and the ones that you do, you get there, you make sure you become friends with those people, and try to do work together, because you're going to make each other better just by working together. You're going to learn things from each other. You're going to get creative. You're going to start doing things that you might not have done, or might not have had the courage to do on your own.
Right.
Your tribe, they may be like, I'll do this with you.
Right. Yeah, and it's like a give and take. And I know Issa Rae, who is also, a huge content creator herself, really talked about, because sometimes I think we're always trying to reach people who are a little too far away from us, as opposed to looking to people who are to your left and to your right, who are on the same plane as you, and pulling them together and saying, hey, we're all looking to do the same things. We all are into the same things. We all have the same interests. We're all interested in telling the same stories. Let's get together and create something. And it doesn't have to be big. It could be the smallest thing as filming a scene and putting it up. It doesn't have to be like a huge project. It can be as small as getting some friends to film a scene from a movie, or writing your own scene and getting your friends and filming that and putting it up on a platform. And
this also underscores something. I promised to come back to Scott after he went back to the green room and talk about this relationship thing, and you all have done it for me, because what you're basically saying is the importance of maintaining working relationships with people that are positive and that work the way that you want to work. I just can't underscore that enough. In my advanced age, that's been something that I've fallen back on time and time again, and it's the source of whatever opportunities continue to arise. It's good relationships that then pay off down the road. I have a specific question for the artistic director on the panel here. As a former artistic director myself, I'm very interested in how an institutional theater is staring into space right now for the next several months, or however long it's going to be, in thinking about how to stay relevant and how to think about coming back. And then I want to hear from Millie and Scott as well about how it feels from a performer's point of view. But here's Cristina at the helm of an institution that has an audience and a community and a staff that is, you're part of their world. So what do you? How's that going right now? It's a tough moment.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty challenging. We ended up having to stop our season halfway through, because our season runs basically September through June. And so we stopped in the middle of a production, and then had to cancel, everything after.
Wow.
So there's been a lot, we had to move quickly, and I think respond quickly to just the shifting moment. I think the way that we're going to survive is the way that most theaters will survive, which is, our patrons are our family, and our artists are our family, and we're going to just, keep letting them know how we're doing, and maybe we'll start creating some theater in some form at some point. But at this point, I think just staying in communication with our audience is important. I started a little program that I'm calling a time capsule project. And so I'm just really, I didn't feel comfortable in this particular moment to start putting work out online. I just felt, I felt the question that kept burning in the back of my head was like, to what end? why do we do this, right? Because the why is so important. To do it, just to do it, eventually loses all meaning and purpose. And so, I just didn't feel like I had a good why yet. And so instead I decided to, ask our audience how they're doing and capture their stories. And I want to hear from them about what their experience has been over this period of time in various states of isolation. And so, that's what we're doing. We're collecting people's stories. And my hope is that at some point, maybe we'll share them with each other in some format, reflecting back on this moment together.
Oh, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, it gets right back to that relationship theme that we've been elaborating on. I'm really glad to hear that, and I think there could be some profound community building coming out of that. Turning to, let's say, Scott for the next beat on this. What are you, as you look at the horizon, what are you looking at?
That's a good question. I'm looking at a lot of lights in my house right now. I think that's what it is, like lights staring back at you and a lot of self-taping. As an actor, purely just answering it from that standpoint, there's going to be a dramatic shift, at least for the next year. It could transition into a permanent shift as casting and producers realize the ease with which they can do this without having to have actors come in. And if people are putting out qualitative auditions on tape, why bother? Why bother the process of bringing people in? My problem with that is that you book jobs off of tapes, you make relationships face to face, you build fans in the room, right? Because something doesn't translate in that respect. So I personally miss that. And I do now. I've done more self-tapes in the last 2 months than 10 years, I would say. Even little things for, like, there's a casting director friend of mine who moved back east, does a monologue challenge or a scene challenge that Erica Breen, she puts it out. So Erica, so we'll participate in that. It's like a 1-minute challenge. You have to create something at home this week and submit it. It's fun. It's fantastic. It keeps you active and inspired in that manner. And I hope I didn't just ramble to nothing.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But Millie, save him now.
Thank you. Please.
No, I think it's all in like what Scott was saying. I think because even I know for myself that I do sort of miss it. I mean, I know that this is kind of what it's going to be for a while, and I think you kind of have to play the game for as long as you can. But I do miss that, being able to go into a room and really connect with people on a human level. And it's like now it's like trying to also maintain that via this sort of virtual world, keeping that authenticity. And but I think you find ways to cope with it like you do anything else, and you use it to the best of its ability and advantage, and you find ways to make it work for you, that are genuine for you. In that,
Well, so I'm sitting here as a proud dean and professor, thinking that each of you have answered this question in a personal way, but you've all come back to the fundamental issue, which is you have to find the reason to do the work. And that to me is a really profound connection among the three of you here in this moment. And I think it's something that the whole field, all of our fields, from higher education to all of the visual and performing arts, are asking that same question really on a daily basis. And one of the things that I'll just say, and then I want you to just feel free to riff on this or not. I'm finding that there are connections happening like today that could have happened last year if we'd thought of it, but we didn't think of it, right? And so there are. I was watching a student staged reading on Zoom the other day, because a lot of that's popping up, of the importance of being earnest. Students just decided to do that, and they had a unique take on it. So I watched it and did a little post-play thing with them, and it was really cool. And during the middle of my watching of the of the show, happily not when I was live on camera, a friend who I hadn't seen since high school, who's in Italy right now in severe lockdown, popped up as a FaceTime call. So I decided to take it, and I had a delightful conversation with an old friend who I hadn't seen in however many decades that is. And that kind of thing seems to me to be the essence of the moment. And to Christina's point about soliciting the stories of your community and maybe sharing it back, in some sort of artistically mediated way. I'm really interested in how that might go, because there are connections happening all over the place that weren't happening before, and we should acknowledge the vibrancy of that opportunity as well.
Absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely.
That's all I got on that. But I actually have a follow up for Cristina, and that is, as you're collecting these stories, what do you have in mind if you have a process in mind to make something out of those down the road?
I don't have a process in mind yet. I want to see what comes, and I've got a couple ideas. Like I'm thinking perhaps it would end up being some kind of performance of some kind, where we put together actors who end up like doing a storytelling evening of some kind with these stories, or it'll be some kind of exhibition, maybe. I don't know. Or we might not. We might just share. I might send them out in e-blasts. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yet. And I sort of I'm wary to kind of like decide now what it would be, because I don't know what I'm getting yet, and I don't want to put something in a box. I just want to take things in and hear from people, because that in itself is also a part of creation, right? These people are creating this work. They're sharing their stories with me, and they're having a process of their own in doing so. And so that in itself is the work. And then the next phase of sharing it publicly is a whole other matter. So I'm just excited when I receive something. And then by the end of it, we'll see what happens. And, but it's really very exciting and cool. Like when I do get an email submission from someone that says, here's my story. And they're all so different and wonderful.
That's so cool. I can't wait to see what happens with that. I think it's very wise to let the content determine the form and the process. All right. Another great erudite question has come in, which again, I'm compelled to read verbatim. So, although I wouldn't have begun it with the word so take that out. Do you feel that only experiential learning is the only path? Is there a place for continued professional development for artists in a more formalized structure? Dewey tells us that not all experiential learning is educative. In fact, some is miseducative. Well, this is somebody with a vested interest in graduate school, I think. I don't know. I don't see who's posting. I only see the question. But it's a really good question. Anybody want to, because you've all taken on the professional paths that you've taken without, you've all done some further training, but without like a formal degree process. So what do you think about that? Experiential learning, educative or miseducative?
I'm going to take a leap and say I disagree with Dewey.
Uh-oh.
I think learn from every experience.
Yes.
I don't think it ever subtracts. You learn from every experience. It may have been a bad experience, but you learn from it. And, I don't know if I agree that it's a miseducation, that you're learning something incorrectly. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how that would even apply to the process, because the fact is that failure is part of the growth in this journey, right? I mean, you try something, it doesn't work, you learn from what didn't work, you apply it to the next step. So miseducative, I don't know how you can sort of go down the wrong path, except you've got a bad teacher, and then you realize that.
Well, here's the question.
Like, you have great teachers like Risa, who also I shared, Millie, blew my mind and opened up a whole new path for me.
But getting to the Dewey point in very direct language, can experience be a bad teacher? In other words, can you learn the wrong lesson from an experiential moment in your career?
It's about how do you define that? How do you define wrong lesson? Really, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Well, good. So good. So you all
I think it's like what Scott was saying. There's a lesson in everything. If you have a bad experiential experience, then you're like, okay, well, I know not to do that again. So that I don't have the same experience.
Yes.
So yeah, for me, I think I agree. I think there's a lesson in every experience, good or bad, and you just figure out how to either apply it or not apply it to your life.
I think, I would say I'm really glad that we put that question to all of you who are out there experiencing things on a very immediate basis all the time. I think it's about how, I'm going to defend Dewey for just a second. I think it's about how you contextualize and interpret the experience. In other words, if you get positive reinforcement for doing really bad work over time, that could be miseducative, right? Now you have to define what bad work is, right? But on an agreed upon standard, and I think we've all, maybe at least I have experienced that once or twice in my life, of getting applause for something that didn't deserve it, which would be an example of that. So that's how that might flavor. But what you're all suggesting, I think, which is really important, is that if you have an experience, whether it's a quote success or quote failure, if you have the ability to look at it in context and draw your own conclusions about it, then there's no such thing as a bad experience. So did I bring that out okay?
You did. I just want to touch on the part about like the getting applause or accommodation for bad work. You learn that lesson after the fact, right?
Yeah.
So after the fact, then you go, wait a second, now I have to like not judge the reception I'm getting from here. The judgment has to come from somewhere here. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it still plays a vital part. It's just so. Again, Dewey's right and wrong at the same time, in my mind.
Just to actually answer the first part of the question, which I think was actually the point of the asking, which is like to go to grad school or not, or to do some kind of formal education. And I mean, my short answer is it's up to the person and the individual and what makes the most sense for them and what they're trying to gain out of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is fantastic. I have, we're unbelievably out of time. So I just want to just sort of bring it home by saying how wonderful it's been to spend time with you all, how inspiring each of your stories is, and how I really just wish you nothing but the best for this next little phase of turbulent waters that we're sailing through. But I have complete confidence in your resumption and extension of your professional journeys after this. And you have been a gift to our audience and to the students and alums and other professionals who are watching this show today. So thank you, Millie. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Scott. And we will, I hope, run into each other in a face-to-face way one of these years again.
Yes.
So thank you, everybody, for watching. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
This
Rick.
now concludes Cocktails and Conversations with the Dean, and we'll see you again soon.
Yes.